Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 5, Episode 23 of the Senstennial Podcast. This week, we've come together for an impromptu episode as rumors and reports from both Friedman and Drager, respectively, have emerged that the Ottawa Senators will be announcing Travis Green as their new head coach. Now, I think this caught a lot of Sens fans by surprise. I think he was probably lower on the list of candidates that people preferred. But for those of you who aren't too familiar with Travis Green, he did coach for the Vancouver Canucks for just over 4 seasons before he was relieved of his coaching duties and Bruce Boudreau took over. And during his time with the Canucks, Green managed to get a single playoff berth with them, win a round. So, good for them. And he had an overall regular season win percentage of a 478. Not great. Most recently, Green was with the New Jersey Devils. He took over as the interim head coach once Lindy Ruff was fired mid-season. And down the stretch with the final 21 games, the New Jersey Devils had a record of 8, 12, and 1. So with all that said, I'm going to pass things off to Bennett, and he's going to kickstart what I like to call the flame train. Bennett, what do you think on this move?
Yeah, all aboard, Sens fans. The flame train is leaving the station. I want to turn it over first to a Vancouver fan who popped into the Sens subreddit earlier today. That's Elastoid. Shout out to you wherever you are, probably Vancouver. I don't know. And he had this to say about Travis Green. He said, to an optimist, he ran a traditional, simple, effort-based system. To a cynic, he ran an unsophisticated system that stifled his own players' offensive creativity and didn't know how to utilize what he had. He had Quinn Hughes, one of the best puck movers in the game, dumping the puck into the offensive zone. And he continued a paragraph or two later, and he said, in his last season, Travis Green had an incredibly talented core of players. Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, JT Miller, Thatcher Demko, Elias Pettersson, and then captain Bo Horvat. He coached them to a dismal 8-15-2. Canucks fans were chanting for the firing of Green and GM Jim Benning during games. They were throwing jerseys onto the ice in frustration as their team was consistently embarrassed. The team looked dejected and miserable out there, typically having games get away from them in the first period and then limply trying to battle back. Now, I don't know about you guys, but also that all sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it?
I can't do this.
It really does sound like the Senators have gone out and allegedly offered the job to what is essentially DJ Smith 2.0, a guy who doesn't coach a sophisticated systems-based game. He relies on individual performers to perform individually, and lack of structure, dump and chase kind of hockey that has teams just trying to, battle their way back into games just based on, effort and trying hard and vibes. And that sounds like exactly what we had and what we fired earlier this season. And it's really hard to get excited about the prospect of a guy that sounds like he, at his best, he sort of just relies on star players to be star players. And at his worst, he actually stifles the effectiveness of those players due to his lack of coaching acumen. And that is just, I think that of all the possible names that were out there, and there were a lot of names out there, this has been possibly the most wide open coaching market I've seen in a long time. Not only you have multiple Stanley Cup winners available, be it someone like Claude Julien, who expressed his interest in the position on the radio the other day, Craig Berube, who has been linked to a bunch of different teams, including at one point the Ottawa Senators. You have guys like Mike Sullivan and John Cooper, who are regarded as some of the best coaches in the game in shaky positions in their current franchises that could potentially end up being available later this summer. I think that getting ahead of all of that, only to hire one of the least talented coaches that was available in the mill this offseason, was a really disappointing and frankly confusing move from the new ownership. It's really, I think it seems that he must have had a really good interview and was able to sell his vision for the team. But it's really hard to get excited about a hire like this. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Nave.
Like, yeah, this one sucks. Like, yeah, I look at it as it feels like a Melnick era hire. Um, I saw somebody posted on Twitter, and it was a really good post about basically like our ideal situation happens that Pittsburgh doesn't fire Sullivan. New Jersey feels like they're backed into a corner and they hire Green. So we can't. So we can't shoot ourselves in the foot. Um, and this truly feels like one of those Melnick era hires where you have several very good candidates out there. And you bring in a coach who, Matt put it great. Like he's got a losing record wherever he goes, including this season on a very talented New Jersey team with goaltending that got better. They went 8-12-1, you said? Yeah. I don't see this move moving the needle whatsoever. I also saw Locked On Senators tweeted a DM they had received that basically said, like, players better really get ready for day one of training camp because, like, you can never really be ready for it because it's super tough. It's bag skates, all this stuff. And I wonder if like that was one of the things that was said in the hiring process. Like, I'm gonna treat these guys like I'm gonna come down hard on them, like really show like, and he said the word accountability probably several times. And the ears pricked up of Steos and probably Jacques Martin as well. But that's another thing. Like Jacques Martin is a systems guy. He knows the game super well. And I just like, how do you watch or even surface level, like just look at Travis Green's record and say like, this is a guy who hasn't had good, talented rosters. And like, I expect him to be better with ours. Like our roster underperforms. It has for the last 3 years. And to go from DJ Smith 1 to a DJ Smith who has gotten to the playoffs, like, is that really the bar? And to be peddled best in class all the time. And then you go out and get a guy like this when you have several cup winners available. You have several guys who are just in the league that have winning records. You have several guys that I think would have been like, I 100% would have rather taken a flyer on John Gruden than this, to be honest with you, because like,
because at least that has the possibility of like surprising you. It's like there's nothing surprising about Travis Green. He's been in the league for 5-6 years. He's never put up a very impressive season during that time. And he's coached teams with a lot more talent than the Sens had and has coached them to losing records. And I truly cannot imagine a scenario where this works in the team's favor. Generally, even in my most daydreamiest of daydreams, I just can't envisage him being better than what he's proven himself to be at this particular point.
I literally just got back from golf, and as we were passing another group of guys, I heard them talking about the hire. That one of them said like, he's a good defensive coach and all this. And he was like, he's definitely like interim coach. Like they're looking for another coach after this. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, is this really it for us? Like, are we just gonna find the playoffs and then stagnate? Like, I don't know anymore. Like, it just feels like, do you guys know that meme where it's the older lady, she's sitting back, her glasses are sitting on her nose, she's got a cigarette, and it's just like, she's done. That's me right now. I'm tapped out. It's feel like the best news we've had in the last like month or so was that the fucking Leafs lost their first round playoff series. Like, we just hired a goddamn coach, and it's even worse. It's worse than we expected. So hell yeah, Ottawa Senators. Hell yeah.
Yeah, and I know I'm usually the epitome of the hopeless optimist. Hearing Drager's report that this is likely the way the Sens are going to go, it was disappointing, I'd say. When looking some of the candidates out there, Craig Berube and maybe, a team like the Leafs have already kind of have like a little handshake agreement with him. I know that was something that what was it, Bissonnette joked about on the broadcast after or on the Dallas Vegas Game 7 broadcast. Um, I don't know if that's actually, a hint at something or not, but maybe he does have a deal with another team in place. I don't know. Uh, you look at like Dean Evison, I think considering the teams that he had in Minnesota and they were hamstrung against the cap because of the Parise and Suter buyouts. Like I thought he did a pretty decent job. Um, I don't know. I think there were a couple guys out there that were at least worth talking to. Claude Julien, like you said, he was on a French media station and said he had interest in the position. And maybe he still comes back as like an assistant or something. And that would make me feel a lot more confident or at least comfortable with this decision. But, when you look at, like Bennett said, that Canucks fan, he at least it sounded quite reasonable, not too emotional, which is good. But I was looking at an article written in the Athletic, sorry, back in 2023 by Thomas Drance, and um, I guess after talking with Green, he believed that they did a lot of things right. That he felt like getting the defense back on track. He believed that progressed quite a bit. But then he talked about how the team would just sag out of the gate and that the penalty kill really struggled. And, he admitted, he's like, I should have put some different players on the penalty kill to help it out. And to be fair to him, of the few head coaches that have run that team around the same time as Travis Green, I believe Green, Boudreau, and Tocchet, their penalty kill always struggled. So it could be a personnel issue, but it's still not really that comforting to know that he is just one of a few guys who couldn't get a penalty kill to work. And that's something that Ottawa really, really struggled with this season. So there's things like that. Ottawa's power play really sucked. And I haven't really seen anything boasting about Travis Green's power plays that he's overseen. So that's kind of a bit frightening. It's just, if you're going to hire a coach, even if they're not like the creme de la creme, if there's something that they specialize in that you think will really help this team, like with Guy Boucher, Ottawa brought him in because he specialized in 5-on-5 defense. It was the whole system. You got to buy into the system. Everyone plays the system. Did it have a shelf life? Yes. Did Ottawa nearly get to the Stanley Cup final in his first season with the team? Yes. Like he had something that worked and, it had a short shelf life. But that's the thing with Travis Green. There's nothing that's like, that's the thing he's good at. Like, I don't know what that is. And so for me, as someone who's generally optimistic, I look at this and I say, well, okay, like, yeah, I'm skeptical. I'm going to be skeptical until he proves me wrong. And that's not just coming out of the gate and winning, 8 of the first 12 games. It's going to be something where you have to see continued success through the first couple months of the season where Ottawa normally falls off the wagon. And you're like, okay, let's start looking at top prospects. Let's start looking at pending free agents and who they can trade off to get assets. Because that is really like what the Sens have been about the last few seasons. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now and I'll let one of you guys chime in. But I think for me, like the lack of specialty, especially, is a little bit concerning to me.
I think one of the things that also, or the thing that goes hand in hand with this other thing is that we're tired and we're at our ends or like our wits end with having to wait consistently for good things to happen to the Ottawa Senators. And like, we don't really want to have to wait and see if this will turn out. Like, it's not, I know life isn't fair, but it's not fair. Like, it's really not, having to expect that, this could go well. But if generally many fans, and fan opinion can be very skewed from time to time, but when I would say like 90% of your fan base pans this decision, when hockey minds are like, this might not be it, like, do you really think that's the move you should be making? Like, I don't know, it just feels like we're really, you know 2 steps forward, 3 back, and we're a rudderless ship. It's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, I think if I had to give the one bright spot that I read and I was like, that interests me, and I'd like to see how that plays out next season, that would be the fact that Green uses data and analytics to help inform his coaching decisions with personnel. That is the one thing that's interesting to me. And I also wonder if that helps the Sens make their decision, try and go with a more forward leaning, in their mind, a forward leaning coaching system, especially now that they have Sean Tierney in the analytics department, might be bringing on more analytics people in the future. Maybe that's something that's important to them, a coach that listens to analytics. And maybe, like I said, that was like a heavily influencing decision in this process. I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't think that make my interest or intrigue in that aspect of his coaching makes up for the shortcomings in a lot of other departments that, are noticeable. And other coaches on the market have systems that, boost those flaws in a team or can help to overcome some of the like primary deficits. And I don't know whether a coach, whether they use analytics or don't, I don't know if like one that specializes in analytics is truly going to be better than one who doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm just skeptical. I would love if it worked out, and I obviously don't want to trash the guy. Like, hey, welcome to Ottawa. I hope it works out. It's just, there's someone who's an optimist. Like, it's just, I don't know. There's not much to write home about here.
Yeah, I think the Sens had an opportunity to hire a coach. You mentioned Dean Evanson from Minnesota. We've already spoken at length about Claude Julien on this podcast. Coaches who have a history of taking rosters that aren't necessarily full of superstars and elevating their game to be something greater than the sum of their parts by playing a smart, responsible game, and by, empowering, perhaps less talented players to take on bigger roles in a successful way. And I think it's a serious missed opportunity, because everything that we hear about Travis Green, be it the comments from Vancouver fans, or you mentioned a DM that somebody shared on Twitter talking about how, oh, he's going to run him to the ground in training camp, and oh, he's big on like accountability and, working hard and effort level and stuff. It's like, that's all harder, not smarter as an approach. And that was sort of what we already had as DJ, is like, we didn't play smart, we tried to play hard. And you can't, to a certain extent, perhaps in the playoffs, that harder, not smarter approach can like maybe like get you like a little bit somewhere. But in the regular season, like 82 games is a long season. It is long. It is too long in my opinion, but that's a matter for another day. And you'll just get found out right away. And teams will just pass around you, and you can't outwork squads that are just better. You have to elevate your game to play at their level. And that doesn't really sound like that's something that he does super well. And that's certainly something that the Senators did not do well previously. It just sounds like more of the same. And, I think that this roster is not, this roster is not on the precipice of being a contender, and all it needs is like an attitude tweak and like a little bit of a shock to the system. Like, this team is miles away from contention. We have no goaltending. We have gaping holes in the right side of our defense. And, some of our top centers, are basically absent every year. And, we don't have any natural goal scorers on the team other than the guy who's in Norris, always hurt and never playing. Like, this is not a team that's like right there. They just need a swift kick in the ass. Like, this team needs a lot of work. And you picked the guy who's only, all that he brings to the table is that swift kick in the ass, by the sounds of it. And I can just see the writing on the wall of, maybe they make a couple of roster tinkerings this summer, hopefully, to address some of those holes that we talked about. And then maybe he runs them into the ground in training camp, team comes out flying, and then, by halfway through the year, the wheels come off and he gets canned at the end of the year. To me, that just feels like the most likely scenario. It's really difficult to imagine him sticking around longer than the season. It sucks hiring a guy that you sort of expect to be fired in the near future. Like, I truly cannot envisage this guy sticking around for multiple seasons. I just really don't see how that's going to happen.
I think if they were smart, like, they would sign him to like a 2-year contract. And, if you're only on the hook for 1 year and he doesn't have a good year next year, like, also, if the Sens have a bad year next year, things are gonna like,
people are at the end of their rope, and I think that people have a lot of, I think, like, patience and respect for the new ownership group, but I think it's a double-edged sword in that, yes, people recognize that Andlauer, no one is saying Andlauer is Meldick. Everyone recognizes that this guy says the right things. He has shown a willingness to invest in the areas that the team lacked. They've identified the weaknesses in the front office and have addressed those. That's something that we haven't seen in 20 years. Great. We love it. They've shown a willingness to invest in the team on the ice, spend to the cap. Great. We love it. So we have a lot of, I think, us on this podcast and everyone else has a lot of time for Andlauer and want to give him as much, rope as we can. But I think that with that comes higher expectations, and we expect to not make boneheaded decisions like this anymore because we thought we were beyond stuff like that. And so I think that, this past season, Sens fans were very critical of the team, booing the team off the ice and stuff. That didn't really happen under Melnyk because the apathy was so strangling under Melnyk that people didn't even care. Like, you just went to the games, you drank your $30 beer, and you kind of just like scroll Twitter and you went home because, you didn't expect anything.
Because vibes.
Yeah, just vibes. Now people went into the season optimistic and they had expectations, and when those expectations were dashed, they got angry because they had that passion for the team again. And so I think that, the scenes that one Vancouver fan described of people throwing jerseys on the ice, booing, chanting for guys to be fired, like, we were just there this past season with DJ, and I don't think people are going to give a guy like Green the benefit of the doubt. They're just going to, if we're like, 8-20 in December, like, people are going to be throwing their jerseys on the ice and shouting, "Fire Travis." Like, it's people are not going to be patient with him.
I think it's a very good rule of thumb. If your home arena fans start a chant that say "Fire insert head coach name here," that might be a good indication that they may not be the best fit for your team.
Unless you're Lindy Ruff and then they come back and say, "Sorry, Lindy," and then and then he eventually gets fired anyway.
So, like, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one way that people lose their jobs as coaches in the NHL is they get fired. It's like, it doesn't matter if you've won 0 games or if you've won 5 cups. Eventually, you get fired. It always happens. Like, unless if you're like what's his face, Rick Bowness, like, retired like the other day, and it's like, that's you only get to do that once. And that's the one time that you get to not be fired. So it's like, but the fact that he's been fired before and that people were chanting for him to be fired, it's like,
oof.
It's like, we get it. That's part of the game. It's like everybody gets fired eventually. But we just went through that, right? We just had to, we as Sens fans basically forced the ownership group's hand to fire DJ. I really don't think that they wanted to do that this past season. And Sens fans made them do it because we demanded better and we demanded a better coach and a more serious approach. And we will do it again if we go to games and think that we're getting DJ 2.0.
Yeah. This doesn't feel very best in
I will do
class,
it
tell you
again.
that much.
I chant
Oh,
to fire
yeah.
DJ. I will
Yeah.
chant fire Green. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
I almost chanted fire DJ at a game under Martin just to show the team that like they're not square yet. And
Well, I
stay
mean,
frosty.
the coach is obviously one part of the equation. I think the next part of the equation will be what Ottawa does with their personnel come the summer. I think there's some really important decisions they're going to have to make. Some, dead weight they're going to have to shut off the roster, and I don't know. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully, some optimism with the NHL draft. We'll see how Ottawa ends up picking there, and hopefully that is kind of a bright light, and maybe more comes in the offseason that makes us a little bit less uptight. We're
Pain.
less pain about this. So I guess we'll see where it leads. But on that note, unless you guys have any final notes you want to add. No, we're
Pain.
done. We're done. All right. Train has left the station and it's nearing the next one. All right.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you to all the listeners and watchers for staying tuned for this episode. I know wasn't a very cheery one. I think there's a lot of angst in Sens fans, and this hiring hasn't really helped any of it. So we'll see what happens going forward. But that's where we got to leave things today. So thanks for watching or listening, and go Sens go.
Fire Travis.
Pain.